Welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for jumping on. If you're like me, since March, you've done most of your training virtually. So you've probably been a part of as many webinars as you can, just to make sure that you're sharpening the edge educationally. So thank you so much for taking your time to be with us today to talk about workplace wellness and caring for occupant health and facility investments. And we've got a good number of panelists today. My name is Brian Morgan. I'm the Director of Operations for Millicare. And just kind of some housekeeping before we get started. If you have a question, if you would type your question into the Q&A section, what we're going to do is we're going to answer that question at a later time in the session. We're going to start our presentation kind of with a myopic view on some things and then kind of get broader, but we've got some good open-ended questions that we're going to ask to our panelists today that are going to give us some substantive answers. So if you've got a question, again, type that in the Q&A section, and then at the second half of this webinar, we will address those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you guys today's panelists. We've got Ed Getz from Sodexo, and I got to make sure I look at my notes here. Edward has over 20 years, and he probably doesn't like Edward. He probably wants me to call him Ed. Edward has over 20 years of experience in the facilities, safety and facilities industry managing industrial, heavy industrial, manufacturing, and warehouse, and office space for corporate clients. His skill set includes a solid background in safety, facilities management, vendor relations, third-party tenant relations, and cost control and supervision of staff. And Ed manages, I want to say he manages maybe 400, 450 square feet at the facility that he's at with Sodexo. So we've got Ed with us today. Secondly, we've got April Morris from Milliken. April is a certified facility manager with 13 years of experience and an additional 8 years of team leadership in manufacturing and maintenance in a support function. She served as the president of South Carolina's upstate chapter for IFMA from 2017 to 2020. So for all of you who are, participating in your IFMA chapters, this is a lady who was IFMA chapter president for a couple of years, and she continues to be active on that board. We've also got Stephen Lee Young with Contact Inc. So Stephen designs and presents training to infection preventative, perioperative staff, and environmental management services personnel across North America in the restoration industry. So he's conducted trainings in multiple different types of frameworks for RIA, ISSA, ABRA, and just a host of corporate events. I've been able to learn a lot from Stephen Leung in just the past couple of months. And then last but not least, we've got Stephen Lewis from Millicare. Stephen leads Millicare's technical education program and manages the network's products, equipment, methods, and certification. He is an IICRC Master Textile Cleaner and approved instructor, as well as a Facility Management Journal Award recipient for excellence in writing, and a Green Cleaning University Green Cleaning Professional. So if we were all together, we would probably clap, but we are virtual. So I'm gonna get right into some of today's questions. Our first round of questions, once again, like I said before, is going to start a little bit more myopic, and then we're going to kind of blow it up to kind of a 50,000 foot view, because we want to talk about disinfectants. We want to talk about people and occupants. We also want to talk about that facility management. We want to talk about that full swath. So with that said, first question, I'm actually going to toss this one out to Stephen Lewis. Stephen, since March, disinfectants have been huge, but could you tell us what the general differences are, or what the differences are between general cleaners and disinfectants? General cleaners and disinfectants.
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to qualify this by saying that the CDC and the EPA and other industry experts always recommend that you clean a surface before you do disinfection, because the disinfectants actually have to come in contact with the bacteria and viruses that are on there. And if there's soil present, that can disrupt or interfere or stop them from being able to come in contact and do their work effectively. The difference is that general cleaners are made to remove the soil and contamination that's there and basically protect the asset. They contain surfactants that suspend the dirt so it can be easily rinsed away. Now, disinfectants, on the other hand, contain active ingredients that disrupt or deactivate viruses, bacteria, spores, and such. So they have two different functions. Now, some disinfectants actually do contain surfactants and are also cleaners, and those would be your disinfectant cleaner products. So that's basically the difference. One's there to kill viruses and germs and bacteria. One's there to clean the surface of contaminants.
There we go, Stephen. And kind of keeping in line with disinfectants in your building, you said general cleaners are there to usually protect the assets that are in the building. Now that we're using so many disinfectants, I know I've cleaned a lot of floors, and depending on if I'm using an alkaline or an acid cleaner, we try and make sure that cleaner itself doesn't get onto certain surfaces. But can disinfectants have adverse effects on building assets? Whereas general cleaners, like you said, they're supposed to protect us. Can disinfectants have adverse effects on building assets, and what might those be?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly the overuse of disinfectants, which may be an issue with COVID-19. But again, these products, some of them contain surfactants, and if they build up on the surfaces over time, that can lead to resoiling. Because again, as I said, surfactants are there to attract and suspend soil. Well, they're not going to stop working if they build up on the surface of your floors or whatnot. So people walk across the floor and they step into the residue from the surfactant, and it's going to clean their shoes basically. And that can lead to resoiling rapidly, so that the more you clean, the faster the floors get dirty basically. The other thing is some of these disinfectants contain bleaches and oxides, and particularly on soft surfaces, you need to be careful of color loss, because obviously if you know what chlorine bleach does to fabrics and soft surfaces, it's going to take the color right out. So depending on the strength and what the active ingredient, that can be an issue. The other thing is we've seen with some Quaternary ammonium-based disinfectants, they have a couple of problems. One, if again, they're overused, they can lead to a buildup and cause yellowing of VCT and vinyl. And the other thing is they can actually interfere with the stain resistance of nylon carpet. So that could be an issue. The carpet will actually stain easier as these quaternary ammonium products build up into the nylon carpet fiber.
There we go. There we go. Stephen Leung, I'm going to pull you in. Stephen Lewis mentioned a bunch of times that there's these overuse of disinfectants. But in wanting to make sure we protect the building and making sure we protect the occupants, we've got to use those, right? So they're fully effective when used properly. What are some things to keep in mind when we're using disinfectants?
Well, I'll start by saying this year, I think the general public's awareness and knowledge of disinfectants has increased dramatically, obviously because we all want to know how to keep ourselves safer against COVID-19. One thing is that people realize that the EPA has issued a list of disinfectants that work against SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. And so they're aware of things like dwell time, which is how wet a surface has to stay. I think there's an increasing awareness also that things like fogging and electrostatic spraying have a very good place in a proper cleaning and disinfecting protocol, but simply fogging or misting a disinfectant everywhere is not really the answer. There's an increased awareness of the need to treat high-touch surfaces. And so I think what we're seeing is that people are looking for products that are both safe and effective. Now, the EPA cringes a bit when a manufacturer talks about how safe a disinfectant is, because their belief is that anything that kills, even viruses and bacteria, can inherently not be safe. So they prefer for manufacturers to use the term toxicity and describe toxicity as either very low toxicity, moderate toxicity, or high toxicity. So when you look at the range of commercial disinfectants that are available, we're finding that people have started using concentrates, maybe that haven't used them before. Now, concentrates are often found in institutions such as hospitals or schools, where in a janitor's closet or in housekeeper's closet, There's a machine that properly dilutes with water the concentrate, but in cases where people have used concentrates and manually measured, there's a need to be very, very precise and follow the label instructions. So I think there's an increased awareness of some of these complications or perhaps nuances of use, and people are getting better at doing that, as well as reading safety data sheets to know what possible risks are.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. You had mentioned too, because they're becoming more popularized and people like actually fogging them and putting them in the air. I thought that might give us a good segue to kind of our next big topic of questions we'll ask, and that's kind of disinfectants in the building occupants. And so, Stephen Lewis, the question I'm going to throw to you is, if we are fogging these, if we are putting disinfectants in the air, how does that play into indoor air quality? How does cleaning, disinfecting play into the indoor air quality when we're thinking about the actual building occupant?
Yeah, so first of all, anything that's heavier than air is going to fall on a surface. And some of those things may not be particularly healthy for people. Things like allergens, and obviously we know about viruses, bacteria, mold spores, odors, they'll all settle on and collect in soft fabrics. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have some type of regular cleaning program to remove those contaminants from those surfaces at a frequency that will allow the building not to, basically the surfaces not to build up, so that when someone comes and sits in a chair or walks on that floor, it's stirred back up into the breathing zone, which can cause an issue. Because a lot of these floor coverings actually act as a large filter for the air that's in your building. So it only makes sense that you clean that filter and get the contaminants out to assure good indoor air quality and a healthy environment. And again, as we use disinfectants, we need to make sure that we don't overuse them, but we use them effectively so that they are killing the virus or germs that may be present on those surfaces after the surfaces have been cleaned of the gross contamination and some of those items that I talked about, soil, particulates, viruses, they're all going to be cleaned up with regular cleaning, but then some will be left behind that the disinfectant will actually tackle.
Yeah, I like that, Stephen, that you took it. You brought in kind of, hey, you're going to be putting disinfectants on things. There's going to be residues, but you're also going to be stirring things up a little bit as far as what people will be breathing in. And so, Stephen Leong, I'm going to bring you back in. And just in case you guys are wondering, hey, when are we going to bring in the facility management folks? We're going to do that definitely on the next topic, because these guys, what we're focusing on right now is just a small part of what they do. But Stephen Leong, can disinfectants, I mean, now that they're in the air, they're on surfaces, we do have to clean them off per what Stephen Lewis said. Can they have adverse effects on people? Can they have adverse effects on the occupants, on the housekeeping staff as well?
They certainly can have adverse effects. And I think some of the things that we're hearing from the field is that in some cases where there's been a little bit of overexposure, people are seeing skin rashes. In some cases, they're having breathing difficulties. Now, some of these things or some of these symptoms seem to be related to specific chemistries. I think if you do your research, you'll see that on the West Coast, some of the local municipalities and in some cases even state governments are looking at limiting or banning the use of certain chemistries. Quats have kind of gotten a lot of attention, and I think it's not that quats are a bad chemistry. I think in the case of concentrates, it may be related to where the concentrates have been improperly used and probably used a little bit too strong. So overexposure is a concern. One of the things that people have become more aware of is botanical source products. And as you can imagine, while many things that come from plants are really good and useful, just because it's botanical doesn't mean it's a magic bullet. So when people look at botanical products, I think as they read the labels a little bit more closely, they're looking for things like efficacy and use instructions. They're looking at dwell times. And so properly used, when you use an EPA toxicity category 4 product, you're going to find that it is going to be very, very good for a lot of the applications and minimal exposure risk.
I like that. Stephen Leong, you brought out kind of some botanical disinfectants there. and I want to pull that out a little bit. What are some other active ingredients that you like and that are also safe?
Well, when you look at active ingredients, I think, again, you've got to look at the specific application. I like oxidizers when used properly. There are some caveats. So, for example, hydrogen peroxide. Many of us are very familiar with this product. In the drugstore, we find it in brown bottles, and that's because hydrogen peroxide can be light sensitive. So it's in a brown bottle to keep the light from breaking it down as quickly. There's some really good hydrogen peroxide products out there that can be in very low concentrations. There's a product known as accelerated hydrogen peroxide, which you'll find in as little as a 0.5% concentration. But what's cool about this product is it has a very fast dwell time, meaning it doesn't need to be on the surface very long. And when it breaks down into water and oxygen. So pretty good. Now, peroxide, when it's in high concentrations, can be harmful. So it can actually attack, surfaces like skin. It can attack your eyes. So that's why you'll find hydrogen peroxide is known as a hazmat when it's 8% or stronger in concentration. So I like peroxides in low concentrations. Some products that are very convenient to use that are also oxidizers are chlorine dioxide. What's nice is that this product's very effective, got great efficacy, but you need to realize it's got a pretty short shelf life, in some cases measured just in hours. And then going to the botanical products, Thymol's really taken off over the last few years. Now, Thymol, whether it's botanically sourced or manufactured in a chemical plant, it works equally well. And honestly, you really can't tell the difference unless you've got a gas chromatograph. And then another product, citric acid, can come from food-based sources. It's very effective. It's got a great safety profile, and a lot of people are getting some really good use out of that.
There we go, Stephen. Stephen, did you say, what was that tool you said? Gas chromatograph? Is that?
Gas chromatograph.
Did I hear that correctly?
It's a lab tool.
You're gonna.
They have them in
Oh, I was
military.
gonna say you have to tell us what that is. There
Well,
we go.
I've worked around some really smart people, but I'll confess it. I'm not a chemist. I've seen one in the lab, but I've never actually used one myself. I think what a gas chromatograph does is it actually breaks down liquid products so that they can be chemically analyzed. I believe, and this is where I'm going to start to step out of my realm of knowledge. There are different columns that you can use that help to discern the presence of different chemicals. And beyond that, I'm going to encourage you to look at Wikipedia because it'll give you a better answer.
There we go. Sorry, when you said that, I was like, I've got to draw that out just a little bit. So, so we're going to transition. Like I said before, we were going to start myopic and we're going to get a little bit more general. So we're going to kind of transition a little bit to reopening strategies, but I'm going to stay with Stephen Leung for just one more question because he does a lot of training with just office staff and folks that are going to be using the disinfectants. So Stephen, you have a good on-the-ground understanding of disinfectants and how it's evolved in the marketplace, just even since March. Can you give us an idea on what you're seeing, what's working, what's not working?
Sure. I think what I'm seeing in feedback from a lot of users out in the field is that they're realizing that one principle is really good to keep in mind. And this is the principle: minimal and responsible chemical use works best for most people. And all that means is find the right chemistry, use as little as possible to get the job done, and you'll probably get some really good results if you understand what the limitations and effects the chemistry can have. Secondly, I think there's really no substitute for effective cleaning before disinfecting. So as Stephen Lewis mentioned, that mechanical removal prepares a surface for the disinfectant to take effect against what the eye can't see. If you can actually see contamination there, you really need to clean it. And there's some products that do a really good job. One of the things that we're also finding is that people are now very aware of the criticality of dwell time. You'll find some products with very short dwell times, meaning the surface needs to stay wet for 1 minute or 2 minutes for the disinfectant to have its full effect. And there are other products that work on SARS-CoV-2 but may take 5 or 10 minutes. And finally, I think we'd recommend really that people take a close look at the disinfectant label as well as the safety data sheet to note any PPE that's needed for using that disinfectant.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're going to transition a little bit. We had come up kind of our myopic experts, and Steven, and now we've got these folks that are putting it all together. I read a book called Healthy Buildings maybe a month and a half ago, and it talked about how your facility manager probably has more of an effect on your health than your doctor does. And so these two and kind of the answers they're going to give, you guys need to make sure you're paying pretty good attention. So starting kind of general on reopening strategies, Ed Getz, what are some strategies that you're implementing at your facility right now?
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate being a part of this great panel. A lot has been going on over the past 8 months. Obviously, with the COVID impact to everybody, we want to make sure that the COVID numbers in our state, in our county, in our city are trending down before we even reconsider opening the building. Now, we are open to critical employees only at this time, but as you mentioned, our building space is 415,000 square feet. Normally, we have on a daily basis over 2,000 employees, visitors, and guests here, and we're probably down to about 100 a day. So we're pretty limited on who's in the building. When we do start to open back up, the customer has decided we will be taking a phased approach. It is not just open the doors and business as usual. So we're looking at starting at a 10% occupancy, and based on how well that goes and assessing it on a daily basis will determine at what point do we incrementally increase that percentage of occupancy back into the building. So some of the things that people will see here, signage. We all go to the grocery stores, we all go to some of the bigger stores, and you see a lot of floor signs and decals and a lot of stanchions and directing people where to go, where not to go. So we've implemented that a lot here. And I think that plays to our advantage because people are going to come in and they're going to kind of be used to that already. So signage is going to help. Talk about reminding people social distance at 6 foot has really kind of taken a baseline of distance to keep. Elevator occupancy, we're going to limit the number of people in our elevators. Workstations, we're going to determine, where people can sit and where they can't sit, and making sure that we keep a good distance from the amount of people that are back in the buildings. We've closed a lot of our amenities. We have a workout room, we have cafeteria, we have a lot of conference rooms that we're limiting space, and we're just closing it off altogether. Just again, trying to eliminate the amount of potential spread of any germs inside the building. Occupancy bathrooms as well. That's another. We're telling people what urinals, what stalls they can use, which ones they can't use. Again, just to limit the amount of people inside these areas. Some of the other things that we've implemented: touchless faucets throughout all our bathrooms and our break areas. So, again, when you look at how this virus is transmitted, it's a lot of the touch points. So we're trying to eliminate as much of that as possible. We've also installed a lot of plexiglass barriers up in our operations area, just to make sure that we're, helping keep, people separated that have to work in close proximity. Building operations, HVAC modifications. We switched to a thicker density filter. Well, it's called MERV 13. A lot of people are doing that. So some of the things we got to watch out is making sure that we're checking with the OEMs to make sure that the equipment can handle that thick of a filter, because it will put a little bit of strain and stress on the equipment. We had recently, before COVID, had implemented a CO2 demand system on all our HVAC systems. And what that means is the air ramps up and down based on the amount of CO2 in the building, which is a part of efficiency and lowering costs and help drive savings. We will be shutting that down. When we start bringing people back in, our air filtration is going to be running 24/7. It's important to get that good air circulation in and get as much fresh air from the outside in as possible. Portable hand sanitizer units, everybody, we all know about the hands. You see them everywhere. We've got them through all our high touch point areas. Now, when associates do start to return, we want them to feel comfortable coming back here. People haven't been here since March. It's been a long time that we've had associates working from home. We want to welcome them back. We want them to feel as comfortable as possible. We've got banners and lawn signs, to return to office, just to make people feel good about being back here at the office. We put together welcome bags and snacks and water and personal hand sanitizer, masks, door openers so people don't have to use their hands as much. We'll be doing temperature checks. As people enter the building, they're going to get their temperature checked just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep any viruses out of the building. And most importantly is the increase of janitorial. It's making sure that they're hitting all the high touch points, the turnstiles, entrances and exits, stairwells, door handles, elevator controls, restrooms, access card readers, everything that you just don't think about that you touch on a daily basis. We want to make sure that our janitorial crews are out there cleaning things. And then when they go through everything cleaning, they go around and they start cleaning again. We've started carpet cleaning again. That was something that we really kind of put on hold as we really didn't have a whole lot of activity in the building, but it's very important, as both Stevens were talking about, to stay on top of this and make sure that regular cleaning is taking place. And when you have the kind of square footage we want to make sure when we're ready to open the building that people notice all these great changes we've done.
Ed, your plan, your reopening strategy is so comprehensive. I can't imagine that something hasn't gone wrong along the way. So what are some obstacles that you've run into in putting together your reopening strategy?
I would say, people are going to be scared and I mentioned that a little bit. People are going to be nervous coming back. So I think, it's making sure that people feel comfortable, people feel and see the changes that we've made, and they know that we're looking out for their best interest, and that we've taken every step, that we can to make sure that they're in as safe an environment as possible. I think having a solid plan with the janitorial staff or your vendor, for disinfecting areas if it is determined that COVID does infiltrate our building at all, and making sure that we know where the people who were infected were, so we can address these areas through either disinfecting or fogging or whatever mechanism that is in place to make sure that we take care of any of the virus. Other things that we've noticed, products are hard to get. MERV 13 filters, I've waited as long as 3 months to get some of those in. So I highly recommend, really look into that, really work with your suppliers and understanding lead times and making sure you have enough product. With the MERV 13s, they do tend to, because they're a thicker filter, they will clog quicker. And again, making sure that the equipment can handle it is very important too. So monitoring the equipment, checking to make sure that you're not putting a whole lot of stress on motors, and that the temperatures in the rooms are where they need to be. Talked about sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is a little bit difficult to get our hands on too. But you got to think outside the box, and we've done that. We brought in a lot of portable hand sanitizer units, and instead of buying individual packets of sanitizer, we've gone with a 55-gallon drum, so we can fill those on site and know that we have plenty of product here available. So I think it's just identifying, a lot of the product that's hard to get and making sure that we got as much of it on hand as possible.
There we go. No, that's good. And you talked about being nervous, and the next question is going to go to you, April, because I know you've kind of implemented this plan before. One of the things people are going to be nervous about when they're coming back to work is getting sick, right? They come to work, someone had it, they got sick. So I know, April, in being able to talk to you as much as been able to talk to you, you actually have a COVID-19 response plan currently in place. From what I understand, you have executed that a number of times already. Can you kind of walk us through that step by step? I'm super interested. I'm sure the folks listening are interested as well.
Absolutely. So we have a campus environment, and we currently have about 200 associates coming to the site out of the normal 900 that would report here, less than what we would have on guest and visitor entertainment. What we do, we have restricted our entrances to 4. And there's a temperature check at each of those entrances. And so you're required to go through that. If you are symptomatic and or don't pass temperature check, then we're able to do a COVID test on site. Actually, we're fortunate to have a nurse practitioner and a occupational nurse here. So if there is an affected associate, obviously they get tested, they're sent home. We are diligent about finding what areas they worked in. We have the third parties trained and tools available to disinfect, whether it be foggers or electrostatic sprayers and appropriate disinfectants. And we go to those specific areas in addition to our nightly cleaning and routine daily cleaning with touch points. We also track and pay attention to N1 and N2 associates who may have been around or near them. And there's a protocol for how they are treated and followed up with as far as whether the initial associate tested positive or not.
No, that's awesome. And it's good to know. I mean, when we kind of put in perspective what you do, I think you have maybe 700,000 square foot on your campus, right? So you've got multiple people going everywhere and you've kind of just brought that in-house. But I mean, it sounds like your team is very cross-functional, right? The people that are going to come in for anything that would be kind of a COVID-19 response. Can you build out for us kind of how the response team became so cross-functional, maybe even how it got started? I'm sure in March, everybody was scrambling, but how did it become so cross-functional?
Well, I don't think it's any secret that cross-functional teams prove successful. And so we have HR, security, safety, facility management, our communications team, all work together. And there's daily meetings to touch base on all topics at hand, whether it's active cases, whether it's all of the things that Ed mentioned on how we're putting our feet on the ground here to make the place more safe for folks to be here. So that team works together on a daily basis.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It sounds like there's a heightened amount of communication among a lot of different people to make sure, again, in our reopening strategies and our infection response, people are taken care of. So I'm going to shift to kind of our last big topic, and then we're going to throw it out to you guys who are listening to us, but kind of occupant impact and communication, right? There's all of these wonderful things that Steve, Ed, and April are doing, but we also want to make sure we communicate those things. So I'm going to bring Ed in, I'm going to bring April in because I want to kind of know how they are communicating what they're doing to their folks. And Ed, you gave us a little bit already, but kind of, can you take us through how some of the decisions you're making, you know, how you anticipate them maybe affecting the physical and mental well-being of those coming back in?
Yeah, like April was saying, you know, having a cross-functional team, and we have the same kind of groups with my customer as well. So I think it's important to make sure everybody is engaged, and all the associates that are currently working from home are all tied in, you know, as we all are, to email systems. So that's really our primary way of communicating, you know, where we're at, what changes we've made in the building, what they can expect when they come back, you know, just so they don't just think they're going to pull into the parking lot and walk in and it's going to be business as usual. Unfortunately, it's not. You know, our world has changed, and we're going to roll with it, and we're going to do everything we can to, as I mentioned before, make them feel as comfortable as they can while they're here. And Stephen had mentioned it as well, that everybody's at home and everybody can do a lot of research. There's so much coming out about the disease and the best way to handle it. So I think it's also really important to have an open mind, and if associates come to us with concerns or recommendations, that we sit down and we listen to them, and we take that back to the table. So nothing should be overlooked. No recommendation should be discarded, and, you know, just making sure that it's full transparency, and we roll that back up to the senior leadership team that makes the decisions.
There we go. There we go. And for all those of you on the call, I'm going to brag on Ed a little bit. I know him and his team have actually kept up even the landscaping. So when people start to come back, they know this has been taken care of in the interim, right? It just gives you that sense of confidence when you come in. April, how are you communicating, I guess you could say, your plans as well to the folks coming back into your facility?
Absolutely. Many of the same things Ed mentioned. Email is the biggest tool that we use. We do a weekly wire where there's video communication through that. We also do town hall meetings. We have actually sent flyers home. We have some of the same things going on as far as to leave at your desk, welcome kits and how to, and flyers. All that lets folks know that you're paying attention to it and you're caring about it. In addition, this was mentioned, but I want to touch on it again, is when folks see the cleaners daily during the shift that they're here, I think is very important. It makes them feel cared for. It makes them, they see it, and that goes a long way. Yeah, definitely. So those are all the questions that I've got for our candidates. I'm going to move to the Q&A section. So I'm going to check, I've got my technology here. I'm going to check some of the questions that are on my second monitor for the Q&A here.
And I'm going to throw these out to you guys as I feel like you might be able to be adequate to answer them. So first one, I think it's going to go to Stephen Leung. Any tips on hydrogen peroxide disinfectants versus accelerated hydrogen peroxide? When would one use accelerated?
I'm going to just clarify something I mentioned a little bit earlier. Accelerated hydrogen peroxide, I think, may be a trademark of a company in Canada called Hvac Technologies. So it's a specific formulation. It's not something that you can do to peroxide as per se. But what Hvac has done is they've blended some grass list inerts and surfactants to help hydrogen peroxide work a lot faster while having a lower concentration. So sorry if I caused any confusion earlier, but you can clean with peroxide-based products, but what I'd look for is an EPA-registered disinfectant. The peroxide in brown bottles is not something we would normally recommend as a disinfectant. It's sold in drugstores as an antiseptic, but that's a very different process.
There we go. There we go. This next one's probably for Ed and April, right? Are your pantries for coffee services not available? Are you guys shutting those down? Ed, maybe you first and then April?
Yes, we've actually went through the entire building and cleaned out all the pantries. We've cleaned out all the refrigerators. We've cleaned out all the food. So we want to make sure that we're starting fresh. And it's a good thing because we never knew how long this was going to be, right? Here we are 8 months into it and you know, people came back and I don't think the milk would be very good these days, but we cleaned out. As far as coffee stations, we do still stock, and it's about individual packets, right? And you see this in restaurants. It's no more. A lot of restaurants are bringing individual ketchup and mustard in little containers or packets versus, you know, here's a bottle of Heinz ketchup for everybody to use and touch. So it's about eliminating the amount of times people touch the product and doing individual packets. And we've done that with coffee cups as well. We've installed disposable coffee cups in all our pantries as well. So again, a one touch, one limit per person.
April, your thoughts there?
Same. We've in most coffee areas, it's single serve, single touch. For break areas where there's tables and we still have to use that, we provide Clorox wipes between each use. We still have our refrigerators and microwaves available for use. They are on our daily touch point cleaning, and there's also wipes available for in between use as well. So it's limited.
Okay. There we go. I think Ed and April, this one will also be for you. There is a question on will the recording will be shared. I believe this recording will be shared. So hopefully that helps you if you're not able to stay for the entire thing. The next question, again, for April and Ed, how about UVC or other HVAC disinfection processes? Maybe you guys know a little bit about that. Maybe you've done a little bit on HVAC and disinfection. What are you guys' thoughts there?
We'll see that. Go ahead, April.
We're doing a trial with some UV. We've ordered, but like Ed mentioned, getting materials and some of that stuff has extra long lead times. So as far as HVAC, MERV 13 filters mainly, and we are doing a trial with UV lamps, but I don't have it in yet.
No worries. I'm sure that the person who wrote that in would probably like to keep up with you to make sure to see how that goes. Ed, HVAC disinfection?
No, again, it's about the filtration for us, the making sure that we're staying on top of the PMs, which we do that anyway. We haven't tried any of the UV, so I'd be interested in connecting or stay connected with April too, to find out, you know, how successful that may be. Is something we may want to introduce.
There we go. I think we're going to stay with you guys as well, because I think between April and Ed, we have probably over 1 million square feet that you guys are managing. How about entrance and exits from different access points to minimize cross traffic, right? So I know even when I've gone into some grocery stores, I enter one way and then I exit another. Are you guys kind of controlling that as well? We'll start with Ed.
Yeah, I know April had mentioned that they've eliminated a lot of their entrance points too, and we're actually going to be doing the same thing. So we want to make sure, well, as far as making sure that we know everybody coming in and out of the building and that we're capturing temperatures and doing that initial check on everybody. So from that standpoint, we are limiting the access on where people can come in and out of. We are doing directional arrows. I mentioned our cafeteria general seating area is closed, but we do have cafeteria services where, again, it's individual portions that are boxed up that people can go in and call in their order to the cafeteria, and then they can come down and pick it up. And they're going to be, traveling a line in a certain direction to make sure that there is no, people aren't walking in front of each other. And again, all about keeping that 6-foot social distance.
There we go. April, knowing yours is a campus, I mean, how are you kind of directing those things?
So we have 7 buildings, and you already mentioned we have about 700,000 square feet, and we have about 47 bathrooms. So it's a good question. Something we've talked about when we reach the point in time that we bring back more people in a phased approach. Something we've talked about and actually have a diagram plan is, for lack of better words, color coding areas. So for instance, if you work in building 5, then you should be able to use restrooms 10, 11, 12, and 13, and try to keep people from what we're accustomed to, obviously, is going to whatever building you have business in, work in, people you need to see, and so forth. I think we'll be more driven to, we've already established with the folks that work here, like I'm doing today, I'm at my desk and my meetings are at my desk. We're not necessarily traveling to the conference rooms. They are labeled with minimal seating requirements. But we are looking at that plan where it's kind of color coded and you kind of stay in your block and do not go into other buildings if you don't have to.
No, that's good. That's good. I think I've got one more question that's going to keep Ed and April kind of on the hook. And then I've got one that's going to come for Stephen Leung. So Ed and April, can you address, and this one is actually a good question, can you address confidentiality and how employees are notified about a potential case or potential exposure? We'll start with April.
Sure. So yes, HIPAA is something to consider. We leave the name out of it. We find out what areas the associate was in, and we talk about areas. For if another associate were in contact with a potential case, then they are communicated that they have become in contact with a potential case. Again, leaving names out of it. But it's handled generically and mainly by areas.
No, that's good. That's good. Ed?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. HIPAA laws are very important that we comply with the privacy of any individual. So we never share any names. When we're doing temperature checks, we're not logging names of people. If anybody comes in with a high temp and I'm not sure where April's at, but we're at 100.4 is what we're using. As far as that kind of that threshold of, okay, you need to go sit for 15 minutes and then come back and recheck. And if it comes down at that point, because a lot of people are rushing from their cars, or maybe they're going out walking during lunchtime. So there could be a lot of reasons why the temperatures could be a little bit elevated. So we give them an opportunity to cool off a little bit, come back through, but we would never, confidentiality is very important, and we don't share that information.
No, that's good. That's good. So this next question, there's actually 2 here. And Stephen Leung, I know you do a lot of training here. And then Stephen Lewis, I know you're a facility professional. So I think you guys might be able to tag team this one. So Leung first, but how much do we rely on janitorial companies to ensure their workforce is educated and aware of the enhanced cleaning protocol? How much do we rely on kind of that housekeeping staff?
I think that's a great question. And the answer I would give is that the janitorial company or your trained professionals, if they're on your staff, are a critical part of a comprehensive plan to protect occupants, building occupants, visitors from any unnecessary exposure. And I'll say they're part of a plan because I don't think any one thing can protect somebody comprehensively from being exposed, aside from maybe them recusing themselves from exposure to anything. And so with regards to the janitorial company, I think one of the things that you want to make sure is that they understand what role they are to play in your plan. I've been in a number of hospitals as well as factories and other types of institutions such as public education since the beginning of the pandemic. And what I've seen is some general approaches, somewhat like what April's outlined earlier, but there are different nuances from one site to another. Even you would think hospitals would have a very uniform plan based on the CDC, but I see varieties of executions when it comes to the details of different plans that they implement. And so I think it's very important to make sure that that janitorial company understands what your expectations are. They have a pretty good understanding of what your overall plan is. And then I think it would be reasonable to expect to maybe participate in the training that they give their staff that's going to come work on your site.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Bringing that janitorial company into your actual overall plan. Stephen Lewis, I want to get your thoughts too. There's kind of a second question after this one. It says, what do facility professionals need to ask/do, I guess you could say, to ensure that these kinds of protocols are implemented and performed effectively? You can just give your opinion here. I know Stephen Leung kind of built that out for us, but a couple thoughts from you.
Yeah, I mean, you want to make sure that if you can find, if you're, first of all, are you doing it in-house or are you contracting out? If you're contracting out, you want to maybe look at a company that has a third-party certification for doing disinfection. And that way you'll know that they've been properly trained and are totally qualified to perform the service. As far as in-house goes, again, you may want to invest in specific training for doing disinfection. That would include using the product properly, following the label directions, making sure it is EPA registered to, be effective on the coronavirus. And then as well as training on how and what PPE may be required and how to doff it and don it, basically, because that can also be critical, especially if there's been a confirmed case of COVID. They need to be very careful on how they remove that and dispose of it. So again, those are some considerations that you might want to consider regarding the training and effectiveness of your janitorial staff.
Hey, Brian, can I mention one other thing? I know you and I had a conversation.
Yeah.
I guess it was probably a week and a half ago. And the conversation was about an article that I had read online about Southwest Airlines. And I love the way the article actually helped me to maybe put a good illustration around the different roles that everyone has to play. And so using Southwest Airlines specifically, when you think about different groups of people that are involved with what that airline does, the airline focuses on transporting customers from one place to another, but you've got not only the customers that come on board, you've got the flight crews that operate the aircraft, and then you've got the maintenance crews that maintain the aircraft and ensure its safety. The maintenance crews on a nightly basis do a very thorough deep clean. If I were to use a hospital term, I might call it a terminal clean or a cycle clean. But then in between each flight, you've got the flight attendants or the flight crew wiping down things like armrests and tray tables, as well as the lavatories and the surfaces of the galleys. And then, of course, you've got the passengers or the occupants. Everyone that gets on the plane has to put a mask on unless you're under 2 years old. And I think everyone is responsible for trying to maintain their own personal safety. And so what I like about that Southwest illustration is when you look at a professional workplace or a business, a factory or a hospital, you've got the same groups of people. They may not wear a pilot's uniform or a flight attendant's uniform, but you've got people that occupy the building and work there on a daily basis. When you look around Comtech here, and I'll move my camera around, you can see that this is a workplace, and when people are walking around, they have to wear a mask. When they are going to the restroom, they're going to practice hand washing. You'll see signs that say, wash your hands immediately after entering the building. And you've got people that actually are going to look for little blue spots of painter's tape, which mark out our high touch surfaces. And so people are walking around cleaning those on a regular basis. Here's my colleague, Peter Kang, walking across with his mask on, but everyone's got a role to play. And so going back to defining what the roles are and making sure that the janitorial company or the staff knows what their role is. If everyone's got a little bit of overlap in promoting that safety, I think you're not going to have as many gaps as if the plan is not clearly communicated.
No, that's good. That's good and very substantial. Next question. This is going to be for you, Stephen Lewis. I think I know the answer already, but what impacts have you seen on floor labels or markers related to typical floor care, right? So they're putting down directional stickers on carpet and on hard surfaces. What impacts have you seen, maybe now or even previous?
Yeah, so a lot of it's going to come down to the quality of the signage that you're using. Obviously, if you have a plastic coating or some kind of laminated surface, that's going to stand up to your general cleaners. That's not going to wash off. It's not going to fade. There's not going to be an issue with it. I know locally here, we're able to go into arenas and play some hockey, and they've got signage on the floor, and they're running automatic scrubbers over that every day, and it's not faded. It's not been an issue. But again, it's because the signage itself has got a nice coating on it that doesn't allow the cleaning chemistry to come in contact with the colorants and the dyes that are part of that. So it hasn't been an issue. Now, I have seen other places where the sign is completely worn off just due to foot traffic. So again, it really comes down to buying a good quality sign so that you don't have to replace it as frequently. If you buy a cheap one, you're going to be ripping it up and replacing it on a very frequent basis.
There we go. There we go. I'm going to bring Ed and April back in. For face coverings, this is a good one. When is it okay not to wear your face covering on your site or campus? Do you guys even have that? When is it okay not to wear? April, go ahead.
We do. If you are in your desk space, you can be free of your face covering. At the moment you exit your desk space and are up and down the halls or any other destination, you're required to have that mask on.
There we go. Ed, same for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have implemented that same policy.
There we go. There we go. And I'm gonna try and bring in a couple comments that were here, because I think this goes back to the actual HVAC that we talked about, because you guys were using or looking to place MERV 13 in. I know, April, you might be doing some UV, but this person asks, their systems are so old that they can't put the MERV 13 in it. So they were asking about that, but they're also using, I guess they're using vinyl oxide or kind of a chlorine dioxide with electrostatic machines. I'm thinking that's going into their HVAC system. Have you guys looked at putting maybe disinfectants through kind of the HVAC even?
No, and I'll mention a little bit of background as to why. It's a great question, and I think when you look at HVAC systems, a lot of times, and I'll tell you, I'm no HVAC system expert, but a lot of times you'll see various components. You'll see a filtration system, and sometimes it's a fiberglass type filter, sometimes it's a non-woven, more effective filter. In some rare cases with controlled environments, you'll find HEPA filters, but spraying a disinfectant on there will not necessarily disinfect the air. And there's a reason why. When you look at disinfectants, you've got the whole issue of dwell time. And dwell time's normally tested on a hard, non-porous surface. It's not to say that disinfectants will have zero effect, but we just don't know exactly what effect that they'll have. Secondly, when you look at the issue of air passing through HVAC systems, normally airflow will cause a liquid, especially water-based liquid, to dry faster. So that works against your dwell time, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge. So it's a great concept. It's a great idea. But there's no real uniform test method for that, because HVAC systems differ from one installation to the next. You can have identical equipment in two different buildings, and just because of the nature of the ductwork, or even things like how the temperature and rate at which equipment's run, the results are going to be a little bit different.
No, that's good. That's good. And thank you, Stephen, for jumping in there. All right, there is, let me see here.
Hey, Brian.
There is another question.
One other good question. I'm looking at a question that Pam Wiseman submitted. The question says, I work for a small library system of maybe 100 staff members. I can't depend on disinfectant wipes. And maybe what she's saying is there may not be a regular supply. So I've asked the staff to use Lysol heavy-duty bathroom cleaner mixed by the janitorial staff, so it's accurately measured at the smallest recommended amount, which is a great way to do it. She chose Lysol because they were already using the product and it cleans and disinfects. She mentions that that product is also extremely hard to get, and she has a backup Quat item. She asks, do you have any other suggestions on how the staff can clean without disinfecting wipes? And she's seeing a lot of what the rest of us are seeing, which is that disinfectant wipes have just been very hard to find. Sometimes you can find them and a lot of times you can't. So I think her question is, what would I do if I can't find disinfectant wipes? You know, if you can't apply disinfectant, you can't get wipes, I think the best thing you can do is clean. One of the interesting things that has been learned about SARS-CoV-2 is that warm soap and water does a great job of starting to inactivate the virus. And so there's really two things that we're thinking about here with that principle of inactivation. One, can you use a surfactant in warm water to cause the virus to lose its ability to infect people, which is yes. If you do that, you can, in many cases, put a hurt on the virus. The challenge is that you can't measure how much virus is left on the surface, and you don't know exactly how much virus that can still infect people is there. And I guess one other thing doctors will tell you is that they don't know how many viral particles it takes to actually get infected. But I think one thing is certain, if a surface is very effectively cleaned and the virus is removed by cleaning, it's not going to be present to have a deleterious effect on the occupants. So cleaning those high-touch surfaces is very important. If you can't get a disinfectant, there's still a lot of good effect to be had by cleaning with even warm soap and water.
No, Stephen, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you guys, we've got questions coming in. It's 1:57. I want to be mindful of your time. I'm going to try and take us all the way to 2 o'clock, or my time, 3 o'clock yours. For Ed and April, this question comes in. A person has cleaning services twice a week. How do they handle cleaning in between, right? So maybe they have a certain outside staff or a contractor that comes in, they clean their office twice a week, but what do they do the other 5 days? What do you guys think? Ed, we'll start with you.
I think it depends on how many people they have in the office. And you know, as April mentioned, I think the most important thing is having, you know, enough janitorial staff to address what we're seeing, right? So we will be increasing our janitorial staff. We are focusing on a lot of all the high touch point areas. So I can't, you know, my recommendation is just, you know, really kind of assess the janitorial program, get your janitorial staff involved, and, you know, come up with a plan that, you know, might enhance it a little bit more, making sure they're focusing on a lot of the high touch point areas, you know, or shifting responsibilities too. That was another thing. So, you know, maybe we're not, you know, dusting blinds as much as we were before, but we're hitting everything that people are putting their hands on.
That's good. That's good. April, cleaning company coming in twice a week, but there's still 5 days left. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Ed. I'd probably have to know a little bit more information about how many people are coming and going, what your dynamics really are. The only other thing I would add to what Ed said is make sure you have availability there with some wipes and available to users so that they can use before and after each use, whatever it is that they may come in contact or share.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Two more questions. We'll probably go a little bit over the top of the hour. I hear a lot of talk about implementing residential air purifiers in the workplace to give employees comfort as an optic, which we know is not effective in minimizing the spread of COVID-19 or other airborne infections. What are you guys' opinions on this? There might be a lot of different ones. Let's start with Stephen Leung. using residential air purifiers in the workplace. What's your thought?
There's a lot of variability from one air purifier to another. So I'll mention just a few things to look for. One is the type of filtration. If you've got HEPA filtration and you're taking particles out of the air, I think that's a big plus. And the reason is viruses and bacteria tend to travel on particles. They don't tend to fly around by themselves. So that's one thing. And of course, I think one of the big vectors of transmission for COVID-19 is airborne droplets. And so if you've got that HEPA filter going, that's going to help. There's a new technology that I've seen out there as well, where UV is being used, or ultraviolet light is being used to attack airborne pathogens. And so what's happening is some of these equipment manufacturers are basically offering a combination of HEPA filtration as well as exposure to UV light. So if you think about it, UV light's what causes sunburns. And so as you look at equipment, you'll want to note, for example, how strong is the UV light in there, and study the specifications. And so I don't know, and this could just be my ignorance, but I don't know of a single standard right now as to what is and what's not effective as far as the amount of radiation output of UV light. But do your research, and I think that if you find it stronger and the HEPA filtration is fairly easy to clean out and maintain, you're probably going to have a better result. Brian, I'm going to mention one other thing, which is a little bit of a rabbit trail for this. And I just want to piggyback off of something Stephen Lewis said earlier. He mentioned certification for a janitorial company. And so the question may be out there, who certifies, and what certification is a good certification? One of the certifications that I've become aware of more recently is ISSA's Global Biorisk Advisory Council, otherwise known as GBAC. GBAC has a certification program, which I have heard more than 35,000 professional cleaners have gone and taken. We've actually signed up our staff to go do that class. And it's a class that can be done online in 2 or 3 hours, but it's going to give you the basics of cleaning and disinfection, as well as a little bit on infection prevention. So I think it's a good class. We've looked into it. Like I said, we're going to sign up our staff to go do it. And that may be something that you consider.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. I think I took that training, so I'm one of the 35,000. But it was very, very, very good. All right, last question. Again, Ed and April, this will be for you guys. Ed, I'm going to say you're going to go first. And this is a hard one. What are some of the practices or policies in place for employees who don't follow the best practices or safety recommendations? Example of not following queue lines or entrances, break room etiquette. What is there something in place for those people who are like, nope, not doing it?
That's a great question. It can be a little bit of a slippery slope there, but I think it depends on your comfort level. Being the manager of the facilities here, I have a great relationship with my tenants. So I think it starts there with the relationship. So I have a great way of connecting with the people that work here. And it really comes to, the right way, educating people on why we're doing things and why it makes sense. So, you don't want to be punitive. You don't want to be punishing people. You want to try to get them on board and, get them to realize the effects or the importance of, complying with the standards. Now, obviously if it continues, you need to take that next step and, maybe get, senior leadership involved in HR, but I find that, having discussions with people about why we're doing it really kind of gives them information to hopefully make the right decision.
There we go. April, any thoughts there?
Yeah, we're slightly different being owner occupied. We definitely handle it more like a disciplinary action where if a non-compliance is found, HR reaches out to the associate. I can't really speak to the steps they take beyond that. I do know it's not tolerated to not be compliant, and we deal with it individually. I do know that we as a company have pushed out information through our education training system that goes through what Ed said, what we're doing while we're doing it, and enlisting participation from associates to self-protect. And that that gets signed off on.
There we go. There we go. And then there's one last question there at the bottom. The name of that training, Stephen Leung, was Global Biorisk Advisory Council. That's the GBAC training. Is it the GBAC training specifically on COVID-19? Do you remember? It was like fundamentals of disinfection, I think it may have been. That's the one that I took.
Yeah, I was just looking that up. It is the GBAC course, and I just typed in the information. Mikkel Gabrielson is the person that we reached out to get our people signed up. I know if you've got a large organization, there's a bulk rate as well. So I think if you're an ISSA member, I think the course is the course is $150. If you're not an ISSA member, I think it's $300. So it may be worth your while to consider membership if more of the ISSA curriculum is what you're interested in.
There we go. There we go. Let me see here. We've still got a bunch of questions coming in. Do you guys, Ed, April, you guys using A-frame boards to help at entrances?
We have stanchions in front of entrances with signage on them saying which ones are closed, so that would be kind of comparable to an A-frame. We don't want people walking up the walkway, getting to the door to find out doors are closed. So if we can catch them at the street, with a sign early on and direct them to the right location, then that seems to help.
There we go. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to take this one last one. This will be for you, Stephen Leung. When using an electrostatic fogger for disinfecting, how slow should we go? And is it fine to spray on keyboards, screens, etc.?
Well, I appreciate you asking me. I was just getting ready to type up the answer to Masood.
Yeah.
Question. I think it's a great question. And here's the guidance that I've gotten from electrostatic sprayer companies. They will defer to the list and dwell time on the product that's being electrostatically sprayed. So several things to keep in mind when using an electrostatic sprayer. One is that electrostatic sprayers tend to put out very fine droplet sizes, which is good if you're using it around sensitive equipment such as keyboards, screens, and things of that nature. You don't want to overspray a liquid product onto an electronic device because it can seep into the device and ruin your device. Now, I will say also with keyboards, a lot of times keyboards are a little bit oily. So that body oil that's on the keyboard can actually minimize the effectiveness of the disinfectant. So this is where Stephen Lewis's point of do mechanical cleaning first is really, really important. You want to get that contamination off of there. And the other thing is that when you use the electrostatic sprayer, there's the droplet size to be concerned about because droplet size will have a direct impact on what the dwell time is. You want to make sure you achieve the dwell time, and so it may take several passes. The other thing is about electrostatic sprayers. Some chemistries are sensitive to the electrostatic probe or electrode, if you will. So electrostatic sprayers impart a charge onto the droplet. One of the things that I've heard from the field is that some chemistries are very sensitive to this. So for example, I was speaking with a forensic restoration expert who made the observation that chlorine dioxide, when mixed at the recommended 100 parts per million minimum required concentration, dropped significantly after being put through an electrostatic sprayer. The efficacy or the concentration dropped by 60%. So you may have to mix it stronger if you're using that particular chemistry. So as you look at your electrostatic sprayer, make sure you follow the instructions on the equipment manufacturer's instruction guide, and then look very closely at the chemistry that's involved as well. Some of the systems are paired. Clorox has a 360 system that has a very specific chemistry that's recommended for it. Theirs has been tested and proven to be effective with that equipment, and so you know it's a good pairing. But other equipment, if you have the option with some electrostatic sprayers, you may want to turn off the electrode, which makes it then a powered sprayer and not really electrostatic. But you'll need to look at each combination very carefully, and you may actually need to take a look at a different chemistry in some cases.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Stephen. One other small comment, I think this goes back to kind of having stickers on floors. There are some manufacturers that actually have carpet tile with messaging on there that you can put down in for messaging if you need kind of some directional help with the folks that are in your facility. So, so with that said, I think we've gotten through just about all those questions. You guys did a phenomenal job in kind of prompting so many more questions that came through. So thank you guys so much. With that said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our time together. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Thank you so much, Ed, Stephen, and April. If we get some follow-ups from this webinar, we'll definitely send them your way because you guys have been tremendous in helping out. And you know what? Hopefully it's not the last time we do this, right? Because you guys have been, again, helpful for me even. So thank you guys, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed the webinar, and thank you.